Well, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Today is Sunday, February 28th, and this is Life Matters. Let's talk about it. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. I am your host, Michele Johnson, and this is Life Matters. You know, this is where we talk about all things African American. And so we are excited about our time together. Remember, if you have a question for our guest, please put it in the chat so I can field it over to our very special guest, who happens to be the one and only Dr. Rosalyn V. Green. Say hello to the people.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm so glad to have you here. You all don't know, but this is an amazing woman. Let me tell you, amazing woman. I could tell you her, tell you all the time that I've spent with her, but she is an amazing woman. I'm going to read her brief bio and we're going to jump right into the show. Dr. Rosalyn V. Green is a licensed psychologist and is retired tenured full professor at Boone State University, where she served as the chairperson of the Department of Counseling for several years. She assisted the Department of Counseling at BSU to achieve its CACREP accreditation, one of the most prestigious counseling accreditations to obtain at a university. She is also a licensed and ordained reverend and has authored several chapters in counseling books, has been the editor of the book Theory and Practice of Adlerian Psychology, and has authored her own publication, Our Father, Imprints That Shape Our Lives. And she has also been inducted into the Manchester Who's Who of Professionals. Welcome and thank you so much for joining me on today, Dr. Green. How are you?
Thank you for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's dive right in. Today we are talking about counseling, getting beyond stigmas. So tell us, what is counseling? Give us an overview of what counseling is, because some people get it confused with other stuff.
Well, counseling is actually just an assistant to helping you through your issues in life and problems. Um, I know people will say counseling in a broad scope, but counseling and therapy are a little bit different. Therapy digs a little bit deeper into your psyche and your personality, as counseling it borders more on giving you instructional needs to get through whatever issues that you're going through.
I'm glad you clarified that, because people use therapy and counseling interchangeably.
Yes, they use it synonymously, but if you are just having some transitional issues going on in your life, then you might go in for counseling. But if you're having some major issues and traumas that have happened with you that are now affecting you as an adult, then you might probably want to go in for therapy, which is going to dig deeper into your history, into your lineage, and your family background, and all that will tie in to show you why some of these issues might be plaguing you today.
Okay, so do you have to be licensed to be a therapist, or you have to be licensed for both, or
Well,
how
you
does
you
that work?
don't have to be licensed to be a counselor or a therapist, but you should be degreed. And it is best if you are licensed, because then if anything happens, you have that credentialing behind your name to hopefully work through whatever goes on. But Do we have some people that are not licensed? Absolutely, that work. Um, but most times when they're not licensed, they work under someone that is licensed. Like you might be working in an agency and there's a licensed psychiatrist there, a psychologist. Then you can work under them as a counselor and they can sign off as, yes, this person is working under me. But you don't have to be, but it is, I think it is imperative that you do get licensed. I think that's a critical thing, that you do get licensed, if possible.
Well, you know me. I'm a counselor at heart, and I have a master's degree in counseling.
Absolutely.
But I don't feel like
You don't feel
I
like you need to be licensed, huh?
no, I just don't feel like going through the process of being licensed.
Oh, yeah, it
Um,
is a process. But the thing about it is, if you do it right away after you say get your master's, then you will be right in line. It won't be as tedious as going back and studying to go get licensure. Everything will be pretty fresh for you. And basically you have to do your hours, sitting with someone and doing those hours. And then you can sit and take the test. It's not real hard, but it is a little, say, time consuming. Let's put it like that. It's a little time consuming. So you do have to put in the time to get licensure. Um, and as you were saying, and I was thinking that some people are gifted already in the area of counseling. They just need the credentialing to go along with it. So, hey, if that works for
Absolutely.
you, all right. But what I would like to state, that if you're not licensed and someone is seeing you, please tell them up front, I am not licensed. Now, I might have a degree, I might have this or that, I might have certification, but I'm not licensed. So they will know ahead of time, because there's some cases where, for example, if you're working with a case that's going to go to court, they want a licensed person there to say such and such about something. So just tell them up front. And it does not mean that you can't work with them. It does mean that if you're looking for certain things for psychologists or counselors to sign off on, and they need to be licensed, then they might want to look for someone else.
Yes, so because I've had a number of like my students in my counseling class or
Hmm.
my domestic violence crisis counseling class who have come to me and said, "Hey, well, can you counsel me?" I said, "Well, I'm not licensed and I don't take insurance." And they're like, "Oh, okay. I would love for you to."
Hmm.
I said, "No." I said, "You have to go to somebody who's real." I mean, not that I'm not real, but
Yeah, that they can pay a cheaper fee and license and all like that. Yes, it's probably the best way to handle it.
yeah, yeah. So you talked about the difference between therapy and counseling. So you said a
Hmm.
little bit about why somebody should go to counseling. Can you delve a little bit more into that? You said that there's a difference between if somebody's traumatized or if somebody just needs some type of life direction.
Hmm.
So why would one go to give me a couple of scenarios on why somebody would attend counseling?
Okay, someone that might want to attend counseling might be struggling with a new job situation, and they're on the job and they just can't seem to get things quite right. It might be working with a computer or working through setting something up. So they might need some instruction, a little bit of assistance. They might need some affirmation to make them, okay, you can do this. It's almost, and that's why a lot of people also say about life coaching, it's a little bit like that. And life coaching takes you through a process. Counseling also takes you to a process. And counseling, I would say, is more of a teaching mechanism more so than therapy. When you're doing therapy, you're actually asking a person to go back, tell me the history of your family. Tell me, how did you feel about this? If there was traumas, what was going on during the trauma? Where were you in trauma? How did it affect you? That's digging real deep into a person's psyche, their psychological history, their history of their family, and it can be very intense, as opposed to counseling, where you say, well, I'm transitioning from being a single woman into getting married, or being from a married woman and now I'm getting divorced. So all those can be traumatic, but it's more instructional. These are some of the phases that you might go through. Grief counseling, there's certain phases. There are 5 stages that you might go through. So which stage do you feel that you're in? And so I'm hoping that you can see the difference between counseling and therapy. A person that's going through grief because of the death of someone, like we will talk about the 5 stages of grief and how it's affecting you, which stage are you in, and how can we move from this stage to this stage and then move through it, as opposed to someone that's coming in from being traumatized physically, sexually, or mentally and emotionally abused. Then we need to go back and find out, okay, when did this start happening? Tell me about how you were raised. And they might not come in saying they were abused. They might come in saying, you know what, none of my relationships are working, and I don't feel like I'm good enough for this. And just some clues as to why they're coming to see you. Life is not working for me.
Right.
And this has happened with my sisters, my brothers, and da 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 da. So then we're looking at therapy. Okay, let's dig a little deeper and find out what the real issue is, because it's not about no one working for you, or nothing working for you, or rejection. It might be some things that you're carrying that's projecting into relationships or other things.
Absolutely. So as a psychologist, do you do both or you just stick to the counseling portion?
I actually do both. I actually love therapy. I love therapy because my degree is in counseling psychology, so it's counseling and psychology. I do a lot of training for as a consultant for groups, churches, and all like that, and that's more counseling. When I'm doing therapy, it's more individual, and or I used to run groups for church, specific women groups that wanted to deal with issues that were impacting them now as adults. So that was a therapeutic group.
Okay, okay. So we have a question from our audience is what are some of the basic core counseling skills? So if I were coming to you having the need of counseling slash therapy, what am I supposed to look for from you?
The first thing you want to do, the basic counseling skill when you come in, is you want to have a relationship with that individual or the groups of people that you're working with. There is no counseling, there's no therapy unless you form a relationship. Now, how you form a relationship, that's up to you. Usually, I'm very relaxed when we're starting out the counseling process or therapeutic process. I tell them, just talk to me. Tell me whatever you want to talk to me about. And if you don't mind, I'll ask you questions as you talk to me. Um, Also, I want them to feel comfortable, to be able to trust. So one of the basic skills is, how do I go about getting them to disclose information to me? One way is to make them feel more relaxed. I usually commend them on coming, and I usually tell them initially, I'm not going to do anything to you. We're actually just going to work together
Right.
as individuals or groups. I'm going to walk with you through this and help you to work through whatever's going through. I'm going to be with you. So I try to make them feel comfortable with that. And I also like to just kind of relax them a little bit. So sometimes I'll do a little icebreaker, just get them to laugh and say, okay, I'm not as bad as you thought I was going to be, right? Or it's okay to be in here. I'm not going to beat you up. I'm not going to hit you. Da, da, da. And then they start like, oh God, we kind of knew you weren't going to hit me. But they start laughing and they begin to feel a little bit more relaxed. So that's the first one of the first skills you want, is to get them to join. I call it joining, building a relationship with your individual or your people that you're working with. The second thing I usually do, and sometimes it's, yeah, well, I always start with the relationship, and sometimes after that it's not in this order, but I will ask them, um, basically, what made you think you wanted to come to counseling?
That's good.
What just tell me why you felt you needed to talk to someone. And then I'll kind of slide in. I was like, because it's kind of expensive to talk to me now, and if you're going to spend this money, then I
Say
want you to
something.
get the benefits from it. Yes. So let's not waste the time. So I asked them, why did you think you wanted to come to counseling? And usually they begin to share. And as people begin to talk, they begin to get more comfortable. After that, I usually ask them, all right, so why do you want to come? What do you want to get from counseling?
Right.
What is it that you want to see happen? I want to feel better. Yes. Specifically, how do you want to feel better?
Yeah.
Okay. So we work with, what do you want? And then what's going on? What do you want from counseling? And then the next thing I usually do is ask them, okay, this is where you are. This is what you want. What are you willing to do to get this? Because see, I can help facilitate the process, but I can't do the process.
Right.
All I
Right.
can help do is facilitate the issues and whatever's going on, show you what's there and help you to navigate through it. The healing process actually comes from the individual. The
Yes.
individual has the healing process within themselves. It's up to me as a facilitator to help bring it out.
And I'm so glad that you said that, because a lot of people I've heard in my whole walk of counseling, before a degree,
Mhm.
after a degree, they'll say, I went to this counselor and they didn't do anything for me. And I'm like, they're not supposed to do it for, they partner with you, but
Right.
you do the work. They basically give you suggestions or give you tools, but you're supposed to actually go out and actually,
Do
as
the
I like
work.
to say, put feet to your face and do the work. And so I'm glad
Hmm.
that you clarified that, because a lot of people, they stop going to counseling after one
Yes.
session, after the second session, because they're like, well, my counselor didn't do anything for me.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people will say, I want a timeline. How long is this going to take? I tell them I don't have any idea. What I will tell them, especially when I'm doing therapy, you've had X amount of years to be like this. So give me some time to help you work through it. They want 4 sessions and I want to be healed. Well, it might not come that quickly. So I can never give a time limit on how long it's going to take. And literally it's up to the individual. People have come to me with serious, serious therapeutic problems, but they were so intent and working through it that it didn't take them long. They made a decision. This is where I am. This is not where I want to stay. And I'm going to do whatever is necessary to get out of this. So they work through it. Does it take time? Absolutely. But it's up to you on the timeline. Now, it probably won't happen in 1 or 2 sessions. I will say that. Most times, if you have serious issues, you don't clarify them in 1 or 2 sessions. When you're
Right.
doing counseling and I'm doing instructional things, maybe 4 sessions, we can work through it if
Yeah.
I'm just doing instructional thing. But when we're talking about reconstructing personality and behavior, that
Yes.
is time consuming. And like I said before, if you have never been in therapy and you are, say, in your mid 30s and you've had traumatic things happen to you, well, you've had 30 years to act the way you're acting. Unfortunately or fortunately, you
Yeah.
survived, but now it's no longer working. So when you come to therapy, it's going to take a little bit of time to work through those issues. And another reason why people stop is because when it becomes very painful, they don't want to deal with it.
Right.
So when it starts hurting, therapy is no joke. It's going to bring up those issues that you didn't want to face, you didn't want to deal with. You kind of knew they were there, but you didn't want to deal with them. And the
Yeah.
reason why I can say all of this is because I've been to therapy. I've walked through therapy. And there were some things that a therapist told me. I was like, no, I don't really want to do that. But I had to look at what I wanted for the future.
Yeah.
And what I wanted for the future was more important than what I was going through then. So I said, okay, I'm willing to stay. And I worked through it. I had to look at some truths that I didn't want to look at.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it can be a little disarming.
Yeah. And as a counselee or a client, coming in with unrealistic expectations can
Hmm.
also create that stigma that counseling doesn't work or counseling is
Yes.
not for me. But it's not that counseling's not for you. You're not working the process.
Yes.
And like you said, when they hit those pressure points or those pain parts points, you'd rather camouflage that with working
Right.
overtime, getting degrees, being in relationships,
Hmm.
camouflage all of the pain points, and then when somebody
Right.
pushes on it, you say counseling is not for me.
Right. Right. And it's so interesting because we're very good, especially in our culture, we're very good at putting band-aids on things and thinking, okay, I put a band-aid on it, it's good. But when it's a deep-rooted pain, the band-aid will finally wear off and that pain's going to resurface.
Or the blood's going to ooze out from under the band-aid.
Absolutely. So,
So you'll be
you know,
leaking off through life, and everybody else
yeah,
can except you.
right.
That's really really good. So um, one of the questions um, is talking about what are some different styles of counseling, like convergent. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but
I haven't done convergent. My styles has been Adlerian psychology. And the reason why I chose Adlerian psychology is because, first of all, the true basis of it is faith, love, and hope, which just really, I gravitated toward those words. I like what was going on. And I understood when I began to study the principles of Adlerian psychology, I was like, yeah, I agree with this. I really think about that. Now, there are several different styles. There's cognitive behavior, there is rational emotive behavior, and there's no way I would get into trying to tell you all these different styles, but
yeah,
there are different styles of counseling and psychology that people work with. My thought about that though is when you see a therapist or a counselor, first of all, make sure that you can connect with them. If you don't connect with them, it doesn't matter which style they use, it'll turn you off. For example, years ago, I went to see a psychiatrist, and I remember, oh my goodness, I was going through so much and da 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 da. I was like, I'm definitely going to see somebody. So I went to see a psychiatrist, and he was a therapist and a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist, different from a psychologist, they uh, prescribe medication. Well, I didn't think I needed medication, but just in case I did, I was going to be with someone that was going to be able to prescribe it for me. And I recall leaving the session, and I never went. I'm going to tell you why I didn't go back. I didn't go back because he never looked at me.
mm,
And I was like, I'm paying my money for you to look down and nod your head and close your eyes. No. I felt that he didn't join with me. He didn't build a relationship with me. You didn't look at me. Oh, I'm important. That was my thing. I'm important. You need to look at me. And he never looked at me. And I said, oh, I'll never see you again. So
yeah,
before thinking of different styles, there's brief family therapy. There's solution therapy. There are different types of styles, but you
yeah,
want to get someone that you feel okay, I have a connection with.
yeah.
I can relate to this person. I feel comfortable. I can talk. I can
Absolutely.
really share.
And for me, because you have to build that rapport. It's absolutely
Hmm.
important. I can't build a
Hmm.
rapport with the top of your head.
Right.
But when we're talking about stigmas, um, oftentimes this is a comment that somebody made. And it
Hmm.
said stigma is the idea that people are crazy or they have some severe psychological problems or diagnosis. But that's not
Hmm.
really the case. But in our community, I believe, and this is what I've seen and what I've heard, even from my grandmother on back, they said, oh, Black people, we don't go to therapy because
Right.
we don't tell people our business. Can you talk
Right.
about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, if you look at our history, we couldn't share our world with everyone because of what would happen to us if we did. So coming from slavery all the way up to where we are, it was always that you don't tell what goes on in your house. You don't tell what's happening behind closed doors. Now, the flip side of that is that the white culture, the European culture, they always talk to somebody. They were talking to some because they had the freedom to, and they had the economy to pay
Yeah.
to talk to someone. We did not have the freedom, nor did we have the money. So
Right.
therefore, it was a stigma, and also the stigma was if you're talking to someone outside the family, whatever, you're going to see someone, you're crazy. Well, the thing about it is we have held on to so many secrets and so many things that some of it has destroyed us, where it's just eaten away at us because we haven't talked, and it
Yeah.
has not been healthy for us, especially in the church world. And the reason why I say that is because I grew up in church. My parents were pastors. I'm a licensed and ordained reverend, so I see the I guess the non benefits of holding on to stuff. And a lot of times, I remember when I was much younger, and I like I said, I grew up in church, and I would see people just screaming and just having just emotional outbursts at church, and then at an early age, I said, that's not all the spirit. It's something's wrong. But no one would deal with it. So there was always a stigma attached to it. And another stigma was not just that we were crazy, but if you were a church going person and you went to see someone outside of the church, then obviously you didn't have enough faith in God to do whatever was necessary. Well, I answer these questions by saying, uh, first of all, I think you should go into therapy or counseling so you don't get crazy, so you don't get that extreme, where you are feeling like I'm losing my mind. Sometimes we say that lightly. I feel like I'm losing my mind, but I think there's a bit of truth to every bit of humor that we say. I really do. And I said,
Absolutely.
yes, something's going on there. Another thing is that I tell people that God made psychologists, counselors, and people in the mental health field, as well as He made other fields. We can take medicine for headaches and for aches and physical pains. Why can't we take medicine for mental pain? That's
Right.
because we felt like it's not God's purpose. And I said, well, your healing might be in that little pill.
Hmm.
Someone called me one time and they said, I'm listening to it was someone that was on television. They said, and I believe God can heal me. And they were dealing with a severe mental issue like bipolar. And I just believe that. And I want to know, do you have the faith? I said, absolutely. Well, if I come to you, can I get off medication? I said, I absolutely will not take you off medication because your healing might be in that pill. See, when we
Exactly.
look at healing, I'm preaching a little bit now, but when we
Yeah.
look at healing, we look at it in the way we think it should happen. But
Hmm.
God works miracles and healings through all different kinds of ways. We just look at it. This is the way I want it. I don't want to take a little pill. Well, that little pill might be keeping you sane. It might be
Stabilize.
keeping you balanced.
Yeah.
So therefore, I tell them it might be into that. And they didn't really want to hear that. And I think it was because they'd never heard a psychologist say your healing might be through something else rather than dismissing a medication. I said,
Right.
yeah, it might come through. It might come through the medication.
Yeah.
So I've worked with several individual, and we worked through the medication, the stigma, and all like that. And the thing about it is, no one will ever know you're in therapy unless you share it, because that you can sue me if I say, this person is seeing me. No, I've been doing this work for over 30 years. And I can share stories, but you will never hear names. And if people have said, I've seen Dr. Green, I said, that's because they've said it. I have not said it.
Absolutely. Got to keep that
So,
confidentiality. And
yes.
And I'm so glad that you said that about the medication, because oftentimes we used to say all the time, I think even Paul said it in the Bible about praying and using the means. You
Uh-huh.
can have you can have a cold and pray to get well, but it's okay to go to CVS and get some cough medicine. You have to
And
you have
take it.
and take it. You have to pray and use the means. And so I
Yes.
think that as the community, again, we get caught up in the stigmas. Like you said, we were told, way back in slavery times, we don't say things, we don't take things outside of the house. And for
Mm-hmm.
the most part, we try not to. But there are those instances in life where we need to get outside of our own bubble, if you will, because the
Mm-hmm.
people who are talking to us are enabling us, or
Yes.
they don't have the wherewithal to tell us to do better because they're in the same pot that
Right.
we're in,
Mm-hmm.
and so they can't help us. And so one of the other stigmas I've heard people say is, if I go, what are people going to say about me?
Mm-hmm.
How do you address that?
You know, one of the things I tell them, if they know that you're going, they have to know because you shared something. And that's up to you. If you want to share that you go to see a therapist, I'm fine. I don't have a problem with that, because see, I don't have a problem with how people look at me. See, we're afraid of the response of what the other person is going to say, how they're going to react. I literally don't care,
Me
because I've
either.
gotten to the point in my life where I need to do what is best for me. When you get to that point, it doesn't matter. If you're at the point of life or death and you feel like I got to talk to somebody or else it's going to be over, then it doesn't
Absolutely.
matter to you what someone else has said. But if it's so important and you say to them, I'm going to get the best help that I can get with the love of Jesus and the prayers of this individual that's working with me.
Absolutely. And I think
So
that's it's important because particularly in the church community, somebody asked the question about getting counseling in church. Um, it said, should leaders in the church have a counseling background or a degree to counsel members or married couples? I think you said from the top that they don't, but I think they need to have some wherewithal, because I've sat in meetings with people who are pastors, and just because you're a pastor, it doesn't make you a counselor. Oftentimes,
absolutely.
oftentimes you're just a spiritual guide
Mm-hmm.
because you don't have the background, you don't have the terminology, you don't understand the
Mm-hmm.
techniques. So you can't really counsel people. So when you go to a pastor, it does not mean that you're going for counseling. You may just be going for a spiritual enrichment or
Mm-hmm.
spiritual guidance, but to call it counseling, you're going to confuse it, because if that person has no background, you're going to say, well, my pastor counseled me. No, he didn't. No, she didn't. Can
Mm-hmm.
you speak to that a little bit?
Well, yes, I think in reality, if pastors are doing counseling, which a lot of them do, and one time those were the only people that actually did counseling, and that we would go to see would be the people of the cloth. I think if you have a counseling background, that is an added plus to you.
Mhm.
But if you don't, then it's interesting how that works. Can it work? I absolutely believe it can. Um, but I don't think if you don't have any counseling background that you should do therapeutic work. You know the differences. I don't think you should, because that's going way deep into a person's psyche, and you need to know what you're doing specifically if you're asking someone to change their whole behavior, personality, which will impact them for the rest of their lives. I think it's helpful, and I think pastors, are great people to talk to. It depends upon what you're going for. If you're going for spiritual guidance, by all means, praise Jesus. That's awesome. But if
Yeah.
you need more than that, I remember one pastor saying to me, Dr. Green, you know what? I was really leery about the field of counseling. He said, but then I worked with this person and we cried, they prayed, and but they kept doing the same thing over and over and over, and it was exhausting. And then I realized this person might need somebody more than I do, than me. So they realized they needed some more work done, because that a pastor that with limited knowledge can only go so far. Yes, God gives discernment. God gives us spiritual intuitiveness. All of
Yeah.
those things come with that. But he also has people in place that, quote, specialize in certain areas. So why
Yes.
not refer them to those people? There are Christian counselors. There are, counselors that do, I'm a Christian counselor, but I can counsel people that are secular, in the secular world and all like that. It doesn't mean that just because I'm a Christian counselor, okay, every time you come to counsel, we're going to fall on our knees and pray.
No.
I seldom, I pray all the time within myself, but I seldom open a session with prayer. So
Yeah.
not that I'm not praying, but I have to gauge my audience. Now, when I'm working with people that are very spirit filled, and God will say, you need to open with prayer, and I will do it. Sometimes
Yeah.
I've stopped the session and said, we need to pray, but
Mm-hmm.
that's not the norm.
Right.
Because see, they're coming for more than prayer. I love it, and I'll tell them, please pray. But besides prayer, there are things that you can do, that we can do. And
Yes.
sometimes if you're going for counseling, and you might only get the spiritual guidance, and that is awesome. But along with that, what is the work that you can do when you leave that session?
Absolutely. Because this, I'm getting ready to get real pastoral and deep. You can't speak in tongues and expect your trauma to be released. You have to
That's
know,
true.
because again, I have seen people who have gone to pastors, and I'm no kick against a pastor. I'm a pastor, you're a pastor. But if you're not equipped to do that, you can cause greater damage or deeper harm to that person, because they're coming to you trusting, because you're a pastor, that you have the wherewithal, the knowledge, the
Hmm.
background, all of that, to deal with the trauma, to deal with the deeper issues. But you don't. So refer
Right.
them out. It's okay to say, I'm not a counselor. I can give you
Yes.
guidance. But if you need help in the deeper things, if you need help,
Hmm.
unearthing things that have, damaged your trauma
Right.
triangle and all of those different things,
Hmm.
you need to go to a therapist. Because we can
Yes.
pray all day, but if you don't know what's behind the biological and the chemical and all of these different things that we
Hmm.
put together, all you're going to do is just put a
Be
spiritual
praying.
bandage on something that is a
Yes.
real human
It's,
issue.
yes. Yes. And there are people that actually can work through that. I also want to say, just because I'm a counselor, quote, I'm a psychologist, doesn't mean that I see everybody for everything. There are
Right.
there are certain issues that I know I'm not the best at. I will refer out. I'm like, this is really not my expertise. Let me refer you to someone who really works in this area.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's great to refer out.
And it doesn't make you a weak person, or it doesn't, you're not incompetent because you refer out. You don't
Absolutely.
want to cause further harm.
That's
Hippocratic
right.
oath, Hippocratic oath, do
Hmm.
no harm. So
Right.
if you're not aware of how to deal with that, don't try to have your ego and your pride come to the forefront. Don't damage
To
the person
say,
that you
let
want to
me refer
prove.
you.
Right. Refer, refer, refer. I tell people all
Yes.
the time, refer, refer,
All
refer.
right.
Um, we have a question from our audience. It says, how do you engage new clients, or what are some steps to engage new clients in the field?
Like I said before, joining with them, have an icebreaker, getting them to talk. Sometimes I would just say, tell me about your day. Just talk to me. Tell me about what's going on at home. Talk to me about your children. Talk to me about something that makes you feel good.
Hmm.
Sometimes if they don't want to talk, I ask them to write. Can you write me a letter? Sometimes people are more prone to write. I actually remember having a client who refused to talk. He could talk, but he wouldn't talk. So we had a session. I never heard his voice, but he wrote down everything, and I responded in talking to him. He responded in writing everything down, which is okay. However, we can get it together where we can work. That's what I'm going to do. Also, I always tell people I have a sense of humor. I,
Yes, yes,
humor
you
is
do.
something that I love to laugh. I love to enjoy life, and humor is something that I use. Sometimes I will say something funny just to break the tension. Just and even when people are coming in very very upset, sometimes I'll say, whew, okay, maybe we need to start with some ice water, cool us off or something. I'll just say something, and it's not natural for me because I have a sense of humor. So I say to you, you said someone will say, well, what should I do? I said, you do what's comfortable for you to make the person feel more comfortable and make the session more palatable for them to begin their work.
So in some of these instances, maybe with you, but I know in certain places like clinical settings, they have an intake form. So you have an opportunity to read a little bit more about your client before they come to you. What has
Yes.
been your experience, particularly in our African American community? Have you ever had an instance where you had an intake form, you didn't know the background? I mean, it takes a little more work.
Okay. Well, I'm a little different. Yes, I always have an intake form. Usually when I was working in an agency, someone would get their intake, do the pre work for me before they came to me. Now, one of the things that I would deliberately do or not do was I would not read the intake. I wanted the basic information, who they were, how old they were, da 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 da. But other than that, I wanted I for me, I wouldn't read the intake until after the session because I wanted to get my own sense of what was going on without having a biased feel toward
Mm.
what was going on. If that makes sense. That was my personal stance. I did that deliberately because it was just easier for me. And then after the session, I'd go back and I'd read the intake. For me, it was just something that I did. Now, most people will take that intake, look at it, and say, okay, these are some of the issues that I might be working with. My thought was sometimes people are more truthful in their behavior sitting in front of me than what
Yeah,
they've written on the paper.
this is
And
true.
so that's why I wouldn't read it until afterwards. But I think it's important. You have to have that information, and I always got it. But I would always wait till afterwards. Lots of times when I'm doing when I'm working now in my private, I still have my own private practice, which I do a little bit of because I'm retired. But anyways, when I'm in my office, I will actually do my own intake, and I'll just ask questions. And as they're answering their question, I'll tell them I'm writing down some things that you're saying. Sometimes I'll just tell them what I'm writing so they won't feel intimidated. What is she
Yeah,
writing about me? I'll just tell them what I'm writing, or I'll read to them what I'm writing, and
yeah,
I'll do my intake that way. So it gives me it just gives me more of a feeling of this is what is really going on now because of the pandemic. I'm doing virtual, but I do have to have the person there. I want to see them. I want to see because your face tells a lot of your story.
it
Your
does.
face tells a lot of your story. So when I'm doing virtual, I want them to be present there with me so I can actually read some nonverbal cues that are going on. If they can show the half part of their body, sometimes I'm looking at their hands and I'm seeing, whether they're clenching or unclenching, how they sit. All of that tells me a lot about how you're dealing with the issue or not dealing with the issue that's going on with you. So yeah, the intake form is helpful and you have to have one.
Yeah, I mean, and I get that. I like the fact that you look at it afterwards to see if
Hmm.
one, you want to get organic responses,
Hmm.
but then you don't go in with these preconceived notions based off of what they've written. And like you said, it
Hmm.
may not even be the honest part that you get from them when you just speak to them, from a normal platform. So
Hmm.
when we talk about these stigmas, um, as we're winding down here, how do we get around the stigmas of counseling? Because we know that everybody may not have the economy to get, to go and get counseling or whatever, but some of the stigmas we've named, but how do we get around it to make sure that people are getting the help that they need, particularly those who are really battling with mental issues, not just someone who wants to talk and change a job, but I'm talking
Hmm.
about people who have
Well,
deep-seated
yeah.
situations.
Well, I think now the stigma is really not as bad as it has been, because if you notice on television programs, people are promoting mental health wellness.
Yeah,
When it comes from the pulpit, that is awesome. People feel like, okay, my pastor said, what? Okay. And one of the things about it is when you're in a situation where you are looked at as the authoritarian of knowing whatever, to share that, yes, I get counseling. I love going to talk to somebody. Everybody needs somebody to talk to. I said sometimes it has been not as good as I would want it to be because it was a little painful, but yes, I go. So that disclosure helps people to say, well, she got counseling, well, shoot, maybe I can go get some counseling too. So
right.
we can have people that are in primary positions, not that I'm in a primary position, but when when I'm traveling around the country, or I'm doing work and I'm working with large groups, I will share that. If we can have pastors to share, it's okay to get counseling. I remember I met a pastor years ago, years ago, and he straight up told me, he said, "So what do you do?" I said, and because I sometimes I just don't even want to tell him. And he was a male. He said, "I said I'm a psychologist." Oh, you know, I don't believe in counseling. If the Lord can't fix it, da da da. I was like, yeah, but then I shared with him some things. I said, you know what? I believe God can fix anything, but God
Right.
can work through anyone also. When I began to break it down, he said, you got a fact. That's really a good fact there. And then years later, I heard him telling his congregation, go and get some help if you need it. One of the things I find out about pastors, I love pastors. Working with people, eventually you're gonna say, look, y'all gonna have to see somebody.
Yeah, yeah,
Because we are a piece of work. We're human, and there are a lot of facets to who we are as human beings. And one person can just not, they're not Jesus. They're not
right.
gods. So they can't handle all of that. So eventually they will say, that if they pastor long enough, they will eventually say, you know what? I believe it's okay for you to go and see someone. So I
Please go
think
see him.
that helps with the stigma.
Please, please go see him. You need to go lay on somebody's couch or something. Yeah.
Yes.
So as a counselor, who do you, how do you select a counselor as a counselor? Because being who you are, and I'm not you, but I know me. I will read people who are trying to read me, and I turn around and I'm like, I know what you're trying to do. So as a counselor, how do you select a counselor for yourself? Because you're both, in the same profession, you both understand all the nuances, all of these different things. How do you select someone to help
I
you?
usually well, since I'm in the field, I usually will ask someone that I trust and I know, and will ask them to refer me to someone.
Okay.
So usually, every person that I've ever seen, this is really interesting, have been referred to me. I've never advertised. I've never put anything in a newspaper, any kind of way. They have all been through referrals. I think that is the best way, is to get a referral if you
The
can.
best
Ask
compliment.
someone who has either gone to a good counselor, or do you know a good counselor, or have heard of someone that can refer you to one. And usually I will have well, I used to have a Rolodex of individuals for different things that I could refer them to. I
Hmm.
haven't been in the field as intensely as I was before. So I don't have that many people that, are in my Rolodex now. But yeah, usually through a referral. I would ask someone close that you trust, look, I want to talk to someone. Um, do you know of anyone?
Hmm.
And if it's your pastor, he might say, yeah, they usually know counselors or people that can work with you through something. So yeah, it's through, basically I would say, through referrals. And
Great.
that's when I've seen someone, it's always been through referrals.
Awesome. So if you were talking to someone who wants counseling, stigmas and all, what are some resources that are available for people who can't really afford a Dr. Green, or to go into, someone who's $150 an hour? What are some resources that you can offer?
Well,
For,
one of
yes.
the greatest resources is um, in your general community. Hospitals run groups, churches run groups. So they need to look through at churches, hospital, any type of institutions they run groups. Groups are always cheaper than individual therapy. Now, if you feel that I just don't want a whole bunch of people, then that's different. It might be a little bit more money. Another thing I want to say is that in the field of counseling, a lot of counselors and psychologists do pro bono work. So don't ever let money be the stopgate for you getting help.
Yeah.
I've worked with people who couldn't pay. They just could not pay, and they were referred to me. I remember someone saying, this person was incarcerated. They're out now. They have to have counseling. Dr. Green, they cannot pay, but they're just an awesome person. Da 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 da. And I remember working with them for a couple years. And I
Wow.
remember it was a male, and I remember him saying to me, whenever I get some money or whatever, I'm going to come back and pay you. And of course, I didn't pay much attention to it, but one Monday I got a knock on my door, and I started not to answer. I looked out because I kind of like, who's at my door? And I didn't recognize the car or the truck. But I went down, and here he was. And this man just stood. He said, "Dr. Green, I appreciate you doing work for me for pro bono," and just gave me five $100 bills. I was like, well, praise Jesus. And I know, it came at a time that I was like, yes, God, I should have needed. But yeah, but to say I've done a lot of pro bono work. Now, you can't do all pro bono because we have to live just as everybody else lives. But
Yes.
if a person really needs help and there is a counselor or person available, trust me, they're not going to turn you away. They're going to make it work some kind of way. I've had people pay me as little as $5 or $20 just because that was all they could pay. And I saw them, you
Yeah.
know. So it really, don't let money be the stopgate.
Yeah.
We can work. Most counselors, therapists, psychologists will work with you through, you know, money issues and insurance company. Because I'm not so heavily in the field anymore, I don't take insurance, but a lot of people now or that are at agencies will take insurance. So you
Hmm.
don't have to pay. And insurance companies are much better now at paying for counseling as prior to, because one time they would not pay. They just,
And
wouldn't pay.
you can also, if I'm, well, I got counseling back in 2002, 2003.
Hmm.
I went through my employee assistance program.
Absolutely.
And so
Yep.
that was
Your
another.
job. Yeah. Your job
Mhm.
might have some. So, you know, ask the questions. Do not be hesitant. And if you need help, you can get the help.
Absolutely. So this is how we broach these stigmas. We have to understand what's important to us. We have to
Hmm.
understand what's a priority for us to be better people, to be healed of our souls diseases, if you will, and to understand that the counselor is not out to get and it's
Hmm.
okay to, for lack of better terms, bare your soul to somebody who can take it and then help you walk through it. Any last words before we go?
Right.
Do you have any last words before we go? No? Well, that is the end of our show. I want to thank everybody. I want to particularly thank my guest, Dr. Rosalyn Green, for
Yes.
joining me today.
At one point in their life.
Huh? Okay, she's frozen. But I want to thank you all so much for joining us today. This has been an amazing show. You can watch the playback on my YouTube channel, which is Life Matters with Michele TV Official. That's Life Matters with Michele TV Official. You can also listen to this show every Friday at 4 o'clock p.m. on sensationalsoundsradio.net. Once again, you can watch it on YouTube, Life Matters with Michele TV Official, or you can listen to it on Fridays at 4 o'clock p.m. on sensationalsoundsradio.net. Thank you so much, Dr. Green, for joining
You're
me today,
welcome.
talking about getting beyond stigmas and counseling. We all need to be on somebody's couch. All of us. Ain't nobody immune. But thank you so much for coming. I so appreciate you. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please send me an email at not www. What's my email address? At mij.com. Michele Irby. Michele at w. I don't even know what is my email address? Help me today. You can send me an email at Michele at iam-mij.com. There it is. MICHELE at iam-mij.com. I am scheduling guests for August. I'm booked up until August, except for July 4th, unless somebody wants to come in on July 4th. But I'm looking for guests. If you know anybody out there who's bold, beautiful, and bald, I'm trying to do a segment on a group of us to discuss about our experience with no hair. So I'm looking to do that segment. But once again, thank you so much, my beautiful friend, Dr. Rosalyn V. Green, for joining me today. Thank you, everybody, for joining me on Life Matters, because this is where we talk about what matters to you, and you. You all have a blessed day, and we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.